And with us now to talk about how rural road projects are chosen and developed, we have from Otter Tail County, the county engineer, Rick West. Thanks for coming in, Rick.
Thank you.
And we also have the MnDOT district engineer, Jody Martinson. Jody, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
And because we have viewers from a very wide viewing area, we'll just cover some sort of geography here first. Otter Tail County, west central Minnesota, and your region, Jody, it's from it's west central Minnesota and also a little bit of northwest, right?
Right. Yep. We go down to Civilift County and over to Otter Tail County in the city of Otter Tail, up to Mahnomen, and then the Minnesota-North Dakota border.
So towns like Appleton and Morris and Fergus Falls and Mahnomen and Detroit Lakes, all in your area.
Yep.
Okay.
Alexandria, Moorhead.
Yeah. So I know that this is the kind of topic that could take a lot of time to go over because rural road projects, and everybody thinks their road is the most important or needs the most changes. So how do you start with this enormous task of figuring out rural road projects? Jody, I'll start with you. How does MnDOT do that?
Sure. Well, we look at the funding that's available, the type of funding. We get some from state money, federal money, but really we're in a preservation mode. So a lot of our roads that we're fixing right now are preservation projects, and so we're looking at what kind of condition the road is in, how much life is left in that road. What is, how smooth is it? What's it like to drive over it? How much money are we putting into maintenance? And then, so we have quite a list of projects, and then you basically go through and prioritize and take the ones in the worst condition and start chipping away at it.
When we talk about planning, I know you'd mentioned before we started the show, we had a little bit of a time here to talk about planning ideas, and you'd said that there are ways for the public to get involved. I know there are meetings and those kinds of things. So tell us how that works or has worked in your county.
In Otter Tail County, when we developed the plan, we had 14 public open houses to educate, to do outreach to our citizens and to educate our citizens on where the money comes from for roads, how we do our planning, are we doing our planning in the proper manner. And through that whole process, it was well worth our time and effort. And it really helped us to explain the situation at hand with what we have for funding, and our budgets are limited as everyone's are, so you have to make sure that you're putting the money that you have in the right place in reference highways. So we were very satisfied with the outcome of that process, and the folks that chose to participate and come to those meetings, I think, learned how the system works and understood why we do what we do and how the prioritization happens with road projects.
So it sort of takes away some of the mystery of why this project versus that one and why this bridge versus that area.
Exactly. There's a reason for all of that, and there's the method of that selection process. Not everyone may agree with it, but there is a process.
And Jody, I know with MnDOT, when we were talking before the show started here, you mentioned the fact that some of these things, the planning is maybe much longer than people realize. You're talking about 5 or 6 years because a major highway project can involve so many different pieces, correct?
Absolutely. MnDOT looks at our projects and we have a 10-year plan, and so we're pretty close as to what projects are coming up the next 10 years, but like you mentioned, about year 6 is really when we want to meet with that community. If we're going through a city, we need to meet with them and find out what their needs are too, because they're just facing right now where a lot of their infrastructure is at the end of its life. And so if they need to replace their water and sewer, that's expensive for them, and it's a huge financial impact, so they need to be able to afford that they can do that at the same time our project goes through. And when we do that, it also provides us an opportunity to really do some thoughtful planning, and so we can meet with the cities beforehand and capture their needs. And there's a great program out there now with the Department of Health sponsors it, and it's a partnership for health. And so basically they have resources where they can send an advocate out to the community that can help capture those needs. And some of the needs are infrastructure, like I talked about, but some are also what do they want their downtown to look like. So the aesthetic things, do they want park benches, do they want some trees planted there, and looking at the width of their sidewalk and different things like that. And maybe they have some safety needs too that we need to address at that same time. And so it's kind of a complete streets concept. We look at, PEDs, we look at bikes, we look at the cars, we look at the freight movement going through there. And so we're able to capture that, and meeting with them 6 years out gives us the time to do that and be able to afford to plan for it in our budget.
So it sounds like some of the Healthy Living Communities initiatives, for example, where you're putting together the idea of how do we make this road project also help people with better biking routes or better walking routes or healthier communities or beautification? So all of those things can come into it at once.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I know Rick earlier mentioned that, for example, community Battle Lake is an example of a community in your area that went through this, right?
That's correct. Battle Lake, not so many years ago, went through that, and Battle Lake was actually, I think, the first community in Otter Tail County, and it was a MnDOT project. We had some intersecting county roads. But that was, I think, the first one that was kind of a complete streets concept where we're looking at safety, bikes, peds, freight, all of the above. And I thought it went very well. There was a lot of community involvement and a lot of discussion that happened of what should the downtown look like. You know, what amenities should be on Trunk Highway 78 through Battle Lake. And I've heard a lot of positive comments from the citizens after it's done. I mean, during construction, nothing's pretty, but and there's inconveniences. But I think after it was all wrapped up and the flowers in the flower pots the next spring, you know, it looks very nice. It's well accepted, and the citizens are enjoying it.
So you have to start with some very big questions and a lot of plans and a lot of time, and then as time goes on, then sort of narrow it down and reshape it a little bit.
Yeah, and I think all of us are doing a better job in the planning arena than I've been in this business a long time, than we did 20 years ago. Absolutely. I mean, that's real, and I think that's a very good thing.
Yeah. It's worth the investment to spend that time up front to get it figured out. It is. It's just, you get such a better product at the end.
I know we talked a moment ago about the idea of how you sort of demystified some of the road projects by having the public meetings, and I think one of the other mysteries for a lot of people is how it all gets paid for. Because if someone's on a morning commute, they may drive on roads that are organized or supervised by 3, 4, or 5 different, from townships to counties to cities to interstate highway systems, whatever it may be. So, you know, is there a way to help people understand where the funding comes from all of this?
Sure. It's not an easy question to answer, but
well, that's why I asked it cautiously, because there are a lot of challenges to figuring out the funding.
There is. I'll start, and then I think Rick, you can probably go into some of the local options that you have that MnDOT doesn't quite have. But basically, it starts out with there's federal money, and then there's some state money that's distributed into a trunk highway fund. But basically, when we start out with that state money, there's really 3 sources that it comes from. So gas tax when you're at the pump, and there's a portion there, and then our motor vehicle sales tax is another portion, and then basically your tab fees. So those 3 sources from the state side of it get put into the highway user distribution fund, and that is split. Basically, MnDOT gets a portion of it, about 62%, roughly about 2/3 of it. Counties get a portion, and then the cities get a portion too. And so for MnDOT, we take our portion from that state and mix it with the federal money that we have, and then that's how our projects, for the most part, are programmed. There's some special funding that comes along, maybe a special bonding bill or something like that that'll supplement that, but that's essentially where MnDOT gets the majority of it. Now the locals have a few more options, and
we do. Jody mentioned the Highway Users Trust Fund, which is license fees and those funds, but we receive 29% of that as counties in Minnesota. Our other funding is federal. On the federal side, example, Otter Tail County, we may receive federal highway dollars about every 3rd year for a project, so it's not every year. Recently, the state legislature allowed us the ability locally to institute a wheelage tax and a local option sales tax, which Otter Tail County has done.
Some counties have chosen to, some counties have not, right?
That is correct. It's optional. You know, the county board has to make the decision to do that, and our county board did. And what that relates in funding for Otter Tail, our county state aid construction funds is about 6.7 million or 6.8 annually million. Those 2 new sources, wheelage tax and local option sales tax, generate approximately 4 million. So for us, that's a nice amount of money that we can invest in our highway system that we didn't have before. It's generated locally, and you know, that was part of our 14 open houses that we talked about, the ability to generate these funds. And I think one statement I would like to make is that at one of our open houses towards the end of the process, one of the actually a retired farmer that I know a little bit, stood up and said, you know, our grandparents and our parents built this system. Maybe we need to step up and maintain it. Yeah. And that will always stick with me. I mean,
Sure.
So we have those monies now, and it will help us. But in the long look at things, we're still about $7 million short annually to maintain and preserve the system. So
let's just say if that money were there and you were able to get to that maintenance thing, what would be the improvements if you were to go beyond maintenance and look at improvements? And people say, well, what are the sort of things that people want to see in improvements in roads? Jody?
Well, I think you look at the type of fixes right now. We're doing what we can with the funds that we have, so I think you would probably see some longer term fixes. Instead of just milling off or removing the top 2 or 3 inches of pavement, you may go in and reclaim and actually dig down into the gravel and do a whole new surfacing. You probably see some reconstructions. You might see some shoulder widening, where some of our shoulders are very narrow. You could see some shoulder widening. You could do more, probably some concrete projects on Interstate 94. So I think longer term fixes would be key.
Okay. And I think for Otter Tail County, we would look at, we have a lot of our system is 11-foot lanes and a 2-foot gravel shoulder, very narrow, a lot of curves and hills in Otter Tail County. And some of these projects, we would rebuild that roadway, reconstruct it with wider shoulders for safety. And one of our big issues is load carrying capacity in the spring of the year when load restrictions are on. But where we're at, I mean, a lot of our work today, the bulk of it is going to be preservation of what's there today on the ground. So we would move to doing some more major improvement type projects versus what we're doing today.
Great. Well, I wish we had more time, but we're out of time right now. So Jody, Rick, thank you for joining us in Compass.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks.
That's it for this week on the topic of road construction. Compass producer Laura K. Prosser will take it from here and end this week's episode with the next installment of the Compass Literature Corner. Thanks for watching.